So Andrew, come on up and share your story.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's give him a hand.
Is the mic working? Mic working all right? I think I'm going to come out in front. It'll scare you up front. One thing I learned while I was walking was that my willingness to listen to people and my ability to do it weren't small offerings, for many folks. Not everyone maybe, but my willingness and ability to do that was a profound gift to many of these people. It was as if some of them had been waiting for years for someone to just take the cotton balls out of the ears and put it in the mouth. Ask a question that this person cares about, and then let me tell you what I got, So it was a gift that I was giving people, sort of unintentionally. I didn't realize that's how it would work. Because I had questions of my own, and it felt imperative that I set out and immerse myself in an experience that would help me come face to face with these questions. And I was going to look to everyone in the country as my teacher. That was the vow I made. I'm going to set out and I'm going to see everyone as my guide, my mentor, my teacher, whether they realize it or not. Whether they realize it or not, I'm going to see them that way. I'm going to ask them questions that way. So for me, it was just something that I was doing in some ways to satisfy my own seeker's desire, but it was also satisfying a need that I ended up seeing in so many people, this need to be listened to. What is it like to be listened to, To actually be heard. To be with someone where you're not having to, it's double Dutch, right? And you're trying to, okay, when's it going to happen? And then you try to jump in and it's all tangled and you drop. It's a lost art. It's an endangered species, listening, or listeners. And we're needed. We listeners are needed. This is what I began to learn as I was walking. But when I began this journey, I didn't know any of this. I just was like, I'd graduated from college. I had all these questions. And I had heard of people doing long walks. And I thought, that's, well, for one, it's affordable. I've got a big tuition debt. And all I have to do is walk. And walking's free. And peanut butter and jelly's cheap. And I can afford that, But it also seemed like it would be a kind of experience that would, take me face to face with some of these questions. All the aloneness out on the highway. And then the miles and miles of walking. How would my body survive that? How would it respond to that? And when I wrote, I had a sign on my back. This isn't my actual backpack, by the way. I love this little setup. It's so cute. I had a sign on the back that said, "Walking to listen." And when I wrote those words down, I realized now that I didn't fully understand what they actually meant. It took walking 15 to 35 miles every day for almost an entire year to begin to understand what walking might be. This thing that I had done almost every day of my life. It wasn't until I began walking with a 50-pound backpack on my back, miles and miles and miles, that I began to see it's a very nuanced practice. It can become a meditation. It can become emotional healing. I had space to feel things that I hadn't had the space to feel. I had the space and the silence and the slowness to think things, realize things that I had never thought before, to meet myself out there. And not just in the solitude, but in the interactions with people. To meet parts of myself that I only could have known in the exchange. And I found that the greater the diversity of the people that I met allowed me to meet the diversity in myself. So being in environments that I'd never been in before. I got to see parts of me that had never been able to stand on the stage, Like this, for example. This was day 1. And I was, of course, freaked out on day 1. You know, I'd never done this before. I don't know what I'm doing. Am I even allowed to do this? What's going to happen out there, you know? Who am I to, you know? So I pack up my big backpack. It's probably about twice that size. I had an American flag, and I had an Earth flag. And boots not unlike those. Had no idea that I would, you know, write a book someday about this and be in front of you talking about it. All I had was my curiosity, my urgency, those questions. Who am I? What am I doing here? Who are we? How do we be here together? How do we be human together with kindness? That's all I had, these questions. Packed up the backpack. Had breakfast with my mom. She was my first interview. I had an audio recorder while I walked, and I would interview people. And she was the first person I interviewed. And I said, "Mom, how you doing?" And she's chewing her scrambled eggs, and she said, "I'm mad at you." She said, it feels like I'm being blown open again, like when you were born. And she also supported me, God bless her. I don't know how she did it. Her walk was more magnificent. And I want to honor her right now. This woman who gave birth to me, who supported me, who let me go. I want to honor all mothers here tonight, all across America, all over the world. We wouldn't be here without mother, without mama. So God bless her. She walked me out, and there are these abandoned railroad lines in the back of her house, which you might recognize. And I had my backpack out there, and she was insisting that we take lots of pictures, you know, picture after picture after picture. And I would say, okay, this angle, and you know, and then this angle, and all of a sudden I felt like I was like a little six-year-old on his first day of school. You know, it's like I got the backpack, and eventually my teenage brother got impatient with the whole thing and shouts, "Would you just hurry up and get on your journey, God?" You know. It's like, oh man, I had this romantic epic departure moment, man. And so I got going. Mom shouted at me to lift up your arms. And then she shot that picture. And the funny thing about this picture is that it sort of feels like this triumphant moment. I don't know what you all think seeing it, but I see that, I'm like, damn, that guy's like, yeah. When in reality, I'm sobbing in that picture. Which just goes to show, don't judge a book by its cover. You never know what's going on in someone's experience, you know. Which is a lesson I got to learn over and over again on this walk. And so just a mile or so in, you know, I'm like, you know, like sort of like coming back into myself. Okay, it's going to be fun. I'm walking, you know. It's like, what's going to happen? And this car pulls up on the side of the road, and this guy gets out. And I'm like, okay, you know, and I wasn't far away enough from home to be scared by people yet. I was still in my backyard, you know. And this guy comes out, he comes through the forest and onto the tracks, and it's Bob, my mom's landlord. And I'm thinking, Bob, are you the teacher I've been looking for? You've been here all along? Are you my guru, Bob? Never would have thought. And I'm like, Bob, what a coincidence. And he said, it's not a coincidence. Your mom's a wreck back at the house. You don't have to do this. I said, well, Bob, that's not exactly the kind of encouragement I'm looking for right now, man. It's big. I was just sobbing back there, you know. Give me some, pump me up, man. Of course, he was afraid for me. He was concerned for me. He said, do you have a knife? I said, yeah. He goes, here's another one. And then he said, don't trust anybody. And I thought, well, Bob, that's kind of the point. You know, the point is to trust in people. And how can I expect people to trust in me? How can I expect people to entrust me with their frailties, their tender parts, their stories? I'm not interested in the masks. I'm not interested in pretending. I want to know who you are. I want to know what bothers you. I want to know about your suffering, your fear, and your joys and triumphs too. But I want to know about all of you. And how could I expect people to show me that, to entrust me with that, if I wasn't trusting them first? Don't trust anybody. Most of us grow up with that message. Understandably, I mean, crazy stuff happens in this world. And for me, this walk was an experiment in taking the first step. Who's going to take the first step into trust? Out of fear, into something else, into trust, which is where love can happen. And without a willingness to say, listen, I don't know what's going to happen, but I am going to step out and try it, and I'm going to wave. Or I'm going to ask, hey, how you doing today? Or who are you, you know? I'm going to trust you. I would walk on the highway sometimes and wave to people, you know, on the highways. And most of the time people would see me and, you know, honk the horn, wave back. Sometimes people would see me, though, and they'd stare me down, drive right by without waving. I said, come on, man. And whenever I got upset about that, I got to see that I was not waving unconditionally. It wasn't unconditional love. I was okay, I'm going to wave, but you got to wave back in order for me to feel good. You know? When my wave was betrayed, when it wasn't reciprocated, the practice becoming okay with that. You know, not needing someone to behave in the open way that I did in order for me to continue being open. It's just trusting. I'm going to trust. You don't want to hang out? Fine, it's okay. So day one, Bob gives me the knife, don't trust anybody. I'm like, oh God, okay. Walking along, a couple miles later, coming out of the outskirts of town, I see 4 men up ahead. And I'm far away enough from home now that I can feel the fear. And we're on the outskirts of town, and nobody's within shouting distance. Anything could happen. And I get closer to these guys, and I see they're Latino guys. And when I'm upon them, they look like they're homeless. And they give me a glance, like, you know, big backpack, American flag, Earth flag, walking to listen sign. I'm wearing a cowboy hat for some reason. I just thought that's what you do, you know, when you're walking across America. No one taught me how to do this, you know. I was just going to. And one of them said, hey, what are you doing? Which was a fair question. And I said, well, I'm walking across America. Which to me sounded preposterous, because I'd been walking for 3 hours at that point. You know, are you even allowed to say, when are you allowed to say you're walking across America, you know? But I just took it. I said, hey, see, look at the sign, walking to listen, see? Swear to God. Printed it myself, laminated it at Staples. And they looked at it, and they didn't look convinced. And the one guy said something to the other guy in Spanish, and I don't understand Spanish, and he started ruffling around in a big plastic bin, and I thought maybe it's time to go. Who knows what he's about to pull out? And he pulls out a big package of cookies and apple juice boxes. And he says, come on, come sit. And I sat with him on a pile of railroad ties. And Martine took out a little flask of vodka and passed that around. And I took out my mandolin and played a little song. And I'm just thinking, whose life am I living right now? You know? Where am I? I mean, I was in the place where I had spent many, many years of my life, but never like this. It was the first moment of realizing what's possible with the intention to listen. You don't need much more than that to catalyze connections that you never would have thought possible. Just the intention to listen. And then the humble practice of trying to do it. Because it's not easy. It's a subtle art. And so easy to dismiss or overlook. But it's powerful and it's challenging. Which is why most of us don't do it. You know? Which is why most of us don't even realize what it is. I didn't know what it was until I spent a year of my life doing basically nothing but listen. which gave me the appreciation of how challenging it is and how nuanced and intricate this practice is. So I'm sitting there with these guys, just what is going on, you know? And then it starts to rain, pour. And the three of them run off into the forest. And Martine says to me, "Hey, come on, we'll take you to our home, take you out of the rain." And I'm feeling Bob's big knife in my pocket. You know. I'm hearing his words, "Don't trust anybody." But then I'm feeling how much it sucks to be wet and to not know where you're going to sleep at night. And then to just remember, this is why I'm doing it. This is exactly why. And so I said, "Sure." And he took me into the forest. And we ended up in this clearing behind a strip mall that I'd been to a bunch of times before. And they had a camp set up and a bunch of shacks made of wood pallets and blue tarps and bungee cords. And I had never known that this whole other world existed behind the facade of this place that I thought I knew. Just a few dozen feet away, here was this whole other world. And my understanding of reality was a little less complete because I hadn't seen that yet. And when they invited me into their home, into their world, I got to know a little bit more about the world, about reality, about the truth of my hometown. It's something about having that humility to remember, right, I don't know everything. You know? I need to ask questions and listen and then hush to find out what's real, what's true. I mean, and with every person knows something that I don't. Everybody knows something that I don't. It's called their life. It's called their experiences. It's called their feelings and their thoughts. And I'm incomplete without that exchange. So I went into Martine's shack, and he began taking off his wet clothes. And he got out some dry clothes to put on, I assumed. But he actually offered them to me. This homeless man offered me his clothes. And when I said I didn't need them, he said, "Okay," and then he started putting them on himself. And I thought, well, what if I had said yes? You know? Do you even have other... Just the generosity, you know? And so we spent the storm in his shack, telling each other about our families. And then when the sun came back out, I walked out, and I didn't want to leave. I was just 3 hours into this walk that would eventually become a year-long, 4,000-mile journey. 3 hours in, and already I had experienced something like love, and I will use that word. Something like love. You know, these men took me in. When I was wet, when I was afraid, when I was beginning this walk that I didn't know how to walk yet, they didn't owe me anything. In fact, maybe they had a reason to be pretty mad at me. Pretty mad at a white man, you know? These Mexican immigrants. I wonder what their experiences with white men had been before this moment. I don't know. Regardless, they took me in. They showed up for me. And that made me love them. And I didn't want to say goodbye. But I had to. I was doing this walk. And Martine gave me a hot pepper that he himself had grown. And all of a sudden my tongue was on fire. And then he gave me a cactus fruit that he had grown also. And then that sort of cooled my tongue off a little bit. It's like, what is going on here? And then he shook my hand and he said, "God bless you. Be careful out there. Always sleep with a knife by your side." I said, "I think you and Bob would enjoy each other, actually. You might not You might not think so at first, but just trust me. Just hang out a little and see what happens, you know. And that was a wish I had often on this journey. If only the people who I had been hanging out with just the night before could be with me now. You know, someone who had warned me, oh yeah, don't walk through the next town. Those people are dangerous, you know. And then I get to that next town and they put me up and they're giving me food, you know. And I'm like, God, if only, you know, Peggy was here. She could see. That happened in Georgia. A wonderful woman took me in. Her name was not Peggy. She'll remain nameless. Took me out to dinner, Applebee's. Yeah, she didn't know me. She took me in off the road. She and her husband took me out to dinner, let me sleep in their home, fed me breakfast the next day. And as I'm leaving, she said, hey, don't walk through that next town. The whites left, the help stayed, and the southern black is a whole different animal than the northern black. What to do with that? What to do with that? What did I do with that? Well, what I did then was nothing. And what I'm doing now is talk about it. Because we have to. And it's uncomfortable. It's a little scary maybe. It's painful. But life is painful. You know? I learned that on the road. It hurts to have a body. It also hurts to be American. Where we've all come from. A history of deep pain and anger. And we have to know how to talk about it or listen to it. We can't talk about it until we know how to listen. I had the great privilege of I happened to walk through Selma on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. You know, imagine the odds of, it just happened. You know, I felt like Forrest Gump, like perfect, you know? Right place, right time, boom. I got to meet Dr. F.D. Reese, one of the men who organized the Selma marches in the 1960s. And I also got to meet James Perkins, a former mayor of Alabama and the first African-American man to hold that office. And he took me to Chinese food for dinner. And again, after this dinner, I said, I almost feel like I don't deserve it. You know, like what did I do to deserve this kind of time with you and with all these people? And he said, you walked. You walked. And you listened. You're listening. And he didn't go on to say what I'm about to say, but you had the audacity to forget yourself, to forget about yourself for a minute, and ask a question, and then listen. Just listen. Listen to whatever comes out, whether it's the prejudice or the pain or the anger. And I was cultivating that ability to listen to all of it, to be able to witness anger without shutting down or taking it personally, or no, you're allowed to be angry. I'm angry too at what has happened here, or what happened to you, or what happened to us, whatever. To be able to withstand and tolerate someone's anger. I'm angry too. Or to witness their grief. I'm aggrieved too. This is empathy we're talking about. It can't happen without listening. And listening is not something any of us is born with. And it's not a special skill that only the lucky ones get to have. It's a practice. And it must be chosen by each one of us. And until each one of us choose it and apprentice ourselves to this practice, it'll be the same sordid tale in America and in the world. You know, until we know how to listen to whatever's there, we'll just be on the hamster wheel of denial, of attack and defense, there's a whole other paradigm, and it's called listening, where it's not about any of that. It's about a non-judgmental willingness to witness, to faithfully witness you, each one of you. And again, it was my honor and privilege to get to do this with hundreds of people over the course of this year. Time's flying when you're having fun. I want to read a story, and then I want to just tell one last story to close up my remarks, and then I would love to have a discussion, a dialogue. I'd love to listen to you. I'd love to see what that brings out in me. Yeah. I figured I'd read a story from North Carolina. The chapter is entitled, "What Are You Really Listening For?" It's here somewhere. All right. The next morning, I entered the heart of the North Carolina Piedmont. Evergreen forests grew thick on the hills, and tobacco fields covered the earth like patches on a coat. Left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. The strangeness of the previous night faded into the new day's light, the hum of the highway, this present moment. A couple hours in, I saw a sign about a half-mile away. It shone neon orange against the tunnel of pines swallowing Highway 109, a quiet country road. I didn't think twice about it. Construction wasn't unusual in the eastern states, and it never bothered me. No such thing as traffic for a walker. Getting closer to the sign, though, something looked different, but it was still too far to read. Before I could guess the sign, the two words crystallized in front of me: inmates working. As usual, my mind jumped. I imagined a chain gang of tattooed men, all of them twice my size. They'd probably throw a riot just as I was passing. Assessing the armory in my backpack didn't help. I had a couple pocket knives and pepper spray, and the guy had just stopped to give me 2 cans of Mountain Dew. At least I could get the inmates annoyingly sticky before they murdered me. The mind, it loves fear. My breath grew shallow. I tried to relax, just keep walking. Each day on the road was a kind of dance with fear, learning how it worked and trying to let it go. But it was hard to let go, especially with a group of convicts waiting up ahead. I hadn't had to do much of that before I started walking. Feel fear, real fear. After my parents split, I went to a boarding school in Delaware called St. Andrews, surrounded by miles of farm fields and forests. The school gave me nearly a full ride last minute, taking me in while my family was still falling apart. I spent the next 4 years in a safe, magical bubble where the biggest thing I had to fear was getting caught exploring the castle of Founders Hall after lights out. It was like Hogwarts without Voldemort. Then I was in the gentle forests of Vermont at a liberal arts college. Throughout all of this, my home base was suburbia. It was a tremendously privileged hand of cards to be dealt, but it meant I was a stranger to certain parts of myself, the parts revealed only in crisis: fear, desperation, fury. I'd hardly ever had to meet those things in me before. The shoulder was dotted with orange garbage bags, stretched tight and torn. I guessed the inmates were picking up trash, though I still didn't see them. Then I did, in the distance. Little dots stippling the 2 grassy shoulders ahead, their reflective vests shining under the gray pallor of the sky. The only official presence was a white van pulling a trailer with a porta-potty strapped to it. There were no wardens on horseback. There were no German shepherds. There wasn't even a police car. When I was close enough to be noticed, I saw that the inmates were women. Before I could get closer, though, the guard driving the white van waved me over. "Just walking through," I said. "That's fine, but you can't tape anything here, and no pictures." He was wearing sunglasses, so all I could see was my wall-eyed reflection. We shook hands, and he congratulated me for what I was doing, which surprised me. I'd expected him to be more confrontational. Do I need to, worry about anything? No, he said, men are more hands-on. We don't have problems with the women. If you respect them, they respect you. But be careful down the road, walking and all. And good luck. I entered the throng of inmates. The first woman I came across was holding a rod and reel fishing pole. It didn't stand a chance of fitting into the garbage bag. My walking stick would hold up well against it in a sword fight, if it came to that, although she'd have much better reach. I nodded hello. You like fishing, honey? She said, offering me the pole. She was in her 60s, or maybe life had been hard. She addressed me confidently, without the slightest regard for what I might think of her. No thanks, I said. I'm not doing much fishing these days. What are you doing? She asked. We were walking together, and we'd caught up to a few of the other women. There were about a dozen of them. Some looked younger than I, and there were some who looked nearly as old as my grandmother, a mix of white and black people. I explained what I was doing. That's so cool, one of them said. I'd love to do that. I said I was glad for the company and that I'd be interested in hearing some of their stories. The woman with the fishing pole smiled and then pointed with her chin to the guard in the white van. That would have been nice under different circumstances. We continued to walk together, and I mostly just listened to the women as they spoke. I'm getting out soon, only 3 more years. I get out in a week. First thing I'm going to do is see my kids. First thing I'm going to do is just be alone. There's 50 people to a room in prison. Everyone's on top of each other. Ain't no business of yours nobody doesn't know. People throw things at us out here. Dirty underwear and bottles of piss. But I don't give a shit because they don't know me. They can judge me all day and I don't care. I really don't. The thick wall of pines next to us began to dwindle, fading into the parking lot of a small supermarket. We were entering the town of Denton. There was a woman loading groceries into her minivan at the far end of the lot, close to the highway, close to us. Catching movement in the corner of her eye, she looked over in our direction, only to return rather quickly to the task of loading her minivan. Soon there was another orange inmates working sign ahead, the end of the road for the women. A white school bus with metal-grated windows pulled up on the other side of the highway, waiting for them to board. I shook hands with each of them before they left. Be careful out there, one of them said. Not everybody's as nice as us. They all lined up outside the white school bus, ascending one by one. I stood on the road watching them, acutely aware that I was imprisoned by nothing, free to walk as far as my body could take me. Though I couldn't see any of the women through the metal-grated windows, I stood still and watched as the bus pulled off the shoulder and drove away into the dying autumn brown. So, listening doesn't speak for itself. It listens. So somebody has to speak up for it, and tonight that's me. And what I want to say is that I held a workshop a couple days ago on listening, and one of the women there said, we were just talking about listening and what is it, and she talked about the feeling of despair that she has experienced by not getting listened to. The feeling of despair. And those of us who are saying, I don't get that, I don't know. Those are the ones of us who have to listen. Despair, not being listened to. What do you? Yeah, if that's you, if that's what you're thinking right now, that okay, pay attention to that. There are people out there who are hurting, who can't heal, until listening is present. There are certain parts of myself that will only show themselves in the presence of a trustworthy listener. And sometimes that's wisdom, sometimes that's woundedness, but it needs a trustworthy listener to come out. And so that's the invitation we all have. What would it be? What would it take? What would it look like to become a trustworthy listener for each other? Which ties into the last story I have tonight. And we'll open it up and we'll see where you all are at. Hopefully with me. Maybe not. And this is the story of the last day. I had camped out in the redwood trees just 20 miles from the Pacific Ocean. I was there. Am I about to spoil the end for you guys? You'll never get to hear me tell it. Might as well just tell it. I mean, I didn't die. I'm here, you know? I'm not spoiling it that bad. So I was 20 miles away from the ocean or so, and I woke up that day thinking, my God, this is it. And I walked down the mountains, and at this point I was pushing a baby stroller full of all my stuff because it had been just too hot and heavy to carry that backpack, you know? And I was coming into the town of Half Moon Bay, and there was no shoulder on the highway, and so I was clogging up traffic. I was causing a traffic jam. And someone had called the police and said, hey, we got this guy who's pushing his baby on the side of the highway. You should probably check it out. And so sure enough, there was a police cruiser on the entrance to town. And they got out and confronted me and said, hey, so we got a call about a guy, think it's you, pushing a baby stroller on the side of the highway. You know, I said, hey. I lifted up my huge walking to listen sign, said, no baby. I'm literally, 10 minutes away from having walked across America. Swear to God. They said, are you serious? I said, I swear to God. And they looked at each other and they said, well, get going, man. We're not going to stop you. Come on, man. Yeah. I said, come to the potluck. They never did show, but. So I was floating into town on this, on my own 2 feet. And I started to see people I recognized, people who had put me up just a few days before in California, people who had put me up in Alabama. Some people flew out. And then I saw my dad, my stepmom. Here they all are. And then we got to the beach. And 2 Navajo men who I met when I was walking through Navajo Nation had volunteered to come out and help me finish this journey with the ceremony. And 2 of them, they met me there, and one started drumming his drum, and one started chanting, and they started sprinkling corn pollen in front of me to lead me on my path to the very end, where there was a big group of people waiting for me. And one of them broke out from the crowd and started running, and she gave this animal shriek. And you can imagine who that might have been. Mama Bear. And she embraced me, and all she was saying was, my son, my son. And I came into this big circle of people waiting there for me. And I came into the middle, and there was nothing else to do but cry. All these people had shown up to support me. And surely I wasn't the only one who deserved support like that, who deserved to be seen like that, who deserved to be listened to like that. And I went around and embraced each one of them, and then they led me down to the water where the father of the 2 Navajo men were waiting, my Navajo grandfather, James. And he said, when you walked through our land, I called you Boy Who Walks in Navajo. And he said, now you have a new name. It's Hastin Niha Nagahi, man who walks for us. And that's who walked into the water. And that's who Each of us have the opportunity to become man who walks for us, woman who walks for us. What would it be like to walk for each other? And not just, those people, not just the North Carolinians or, not just the Vermonters. No, all of us, not just the red. No, I'm interested in the unity in our name. Man who walks for us, woman who walks for us. Listening for us. What would that world look like? What would that America look like? I want to know. I want to know. So thank you for listening to me tonight. And I invite your questions. Yes, sir.
Do you ever plan to run for political office? Have a major impact on some of the things you believe in strongly?
What was that second part of your question?
So that you can try to make things better in a lot of ways.
Do I have intentions to run for political office so that I may increase my impact? I don't have that intention. I don't know where I'll end up. But I do have the intention to increase the impact. Absolutely. That's why I'm here. If you all know of ways that you can assist me in getting this message out, I invite them. I've got a website, livingtolisten.com. Send me an email. I'm ready to talk. I'm ready to, I've listened for a long time. I'm ready to talk. I'm still learning. It's not like I have the answer. I'm still learning. And I have also learned some things that I'm ready to share and keep learning about. So yeah, let's spread that good gospel of listening, the good news. Yes, ma'am.
How many states did you actually go through?
How many states did I actually go through? Well, if you count Pennsylvania, which I was in for like 2 days, I'm going to count it. 15. 15. Yeah, I started in Philadelphia, right outside Philly, and I went down to New Orleans, and then I finished in San Francisco. Happening Bay. A big smile. Yes, ma'am.
After you finished this, what did you do after that? Did you start working immediately, or how long did you take some time and kind of reflect on everything?
What did
How
I?
long did it take you to write?
What did I do after I finished walking, and how long did it take to write the book? When I finished walking that night, I got in a hot tub. And I just relaxed, had a nice glass of wine. And then I got to work pretty quickly. I rested for a couple weeks, and I had recorded 85 hours of interviews. And my mentor and friend, Jay Allison, a man who became my mentor and friend through this process, helped me make a radio piece out of it, which you can find at transom.org. And there's a link to it in the book. And then when I finished that, while I was co-producing that radio essay, I knew that a book might be possible, but I was also aware that I might be burnt out on the experience after co-producing this big radio piece. But when we did finish it, I was just like, I gotta write that book. There's more. There's so much more. And so I finished walking in September 2012, and I started writing the book in June of 2013. And it took me, it took me 4 years to get it out. Which, and that's a whole other talk. I could talk to you about that journey, but. Yes, ma'am.
When we were in Georgia, we have a family, went to Applebee's.
Yes.
And when they say,
yes.
It's best just to look out for yourself because we got northern blacks are much dangerous than the southern blacks. But my aunt used to say you have to know when not to open your mouth on certain places that you can really scared to go.
Yeah.
But
thank you.
Would you have the urge just to say you're racist or something like that, just to block like in? Because sometimes you just want to get it all out and tell them just,
Yeah.
Because like you said, everything is painful, but sometimes you have to
Yeah.
get rid of the pain.
Yes.
I agree with you too.
Yes. I love that comment and question. And an experience like that was kind of the first, because I'm white, so I have not been the recipient of racism. I have not had to look at it, myself or receive real hatred because of the way I look. And so when she brought me into the dirt of it, I didn't know what to do. And I felt, like you said, I felt all the anger and but then the fear and is this the place where I say something? All of that was my process of learning how to ask a question. So that's what eventually I started to do is when someone would show me something like that or say something like that, I would try to stay in connection with them. So it's like I'm not gonna meet your hate with hate. I'm just not gonna do it because then if I'm hating that which hates, I've become that which hates. So I'm not gonna hate. I'm gonna stay connected. I'm gonna try to understand, and I'm gonna ask you questions. And I'm going to trust that there's something behind all this BS that is human. That's human. That's sane. That has a breakable heart and is vulnerable and somewhere has the capacity to understand and change. And I'm not going to try to change them, but I'm going to just relate to that part of them and I'm going to stay in connection and I'm going to try to ask questions. So that's what I would do. I would say, yeah.
Just to prove the point that
Yeah.
it really puts the hurt to many
Yeah.
people, but somehow or another, the kids are trying to be raised to
Yeah.
what they were listening to.
Yeah. Yes.
No, I'm a writer myself.
Mm.
Been around
Yeah.
many places.
Yeah.
Went to Charlotte one time, but now the time at Raleigh.
Yeah.
And I went to my first time last year in Detroit. My second was in Detroit through the Motown, and it was wonderful.
Mm.
And I was speaking to one homeless man, and he wants me to pray with him. I said, thank goodness, because I have to open up my heart for Detroit too. There's too many liquor stores, too many depression, and I'm just getting, the load of understanding, just to make myself into a realistic kind of form.
Yeah,
make
yeah.
myself into anyone else in here.
Yeah, right. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for doing that. And thank you so much for asking that question and sharing your experience.
And then during the book, you keep going through, you don't listen to that advice, if I recall correctly. You go into those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And you become a part of that.
Oh, the advice that the woman gave me?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let me finish that story. So she said that to me that morning, threw a screwball into my consciousness, and I was freaking out, and then eventually I ended up in that city at the end of the day, that little town. It became a thing where it was like, I shouldn't go there? Okay, I know exactly where I'm going. You're going to find out the truth. So I walked into this town and passed a few little, bar, general store, whatever, just, the stuff you pass coming into a town. And then I saw a fire station there. And I knocked on their door. And this is Tuskegee, home of the Tuskegee Airmen. And also, what these firefighters told me, the only all-black fire station in the country. And they saw me walking through, listened to what I was doing, and said, yeah, man, absolutely. Pitch a tent, take a shower, come hang out with us. And I ended up staying up till midnight with these men, listening to their stories, connecting, and it was lovely. And so it's not to say, again, that bad things don't happen or that certain places aren't dangerous. Right, there are risks and bad stuff happens, absolutely. But let's not assume anything. Let's go find out. Yeah, thank you.
And that's all I know about your book. You would take that hike.
Yeah.
And take those chances at the barbershop scene.
That's right.
Which is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
That's just comment, not a question.
Thank you. Maybe at least 2 more questions.
At the end of the journey,
Yeah.
if you had time to assess what you
Mm.
had seen and heard,
Mm.
do you now, standing here before this group, have a feeling that most folks are not
Yeah.
bad or good.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a simple way for
Right.
me to think of it.
Yeah. Yeah, the question was, after this journey, do I have the sense, standing before this crowd now, that most of us aren't bad? Did I say that right? Yeah, what I came to see is that nobody's bad. Nobody's bad. Nobody's wrong, in that it's not wrong that they're there. It's not wrong that they exist. It's actually not wrong that they believe what they believe. It's in some ways like, of course, you grew up, there's a reason why someone believes what they believe. And what I got hammered into me was, maybe that's too forceful a metaphor, what I got trained in was remembering that there is that peace inside them somewhere. And someone may have done something atrocious. They may believe something reprehensible. They may be, in fact, trying to harm me. And even then, there's something somewhere in them that is human. And I'll just say it, I became so trustworthy a listener that people were willing to show me those parts of themselves. So hard-faced people, who might normally keep up the, and who knows, who might even come at you. I became an environment that was so invitational, non-judgmental, and safe, and listening, that those people, many of them, trusted me enough to show me those tender bits that we all have. And so that convinced me that if I'm thinking in terms, as you sort of alluded to, if I'm thinking in terms of good and bad, I'm just not seeing things correctly. I'm in a state of delusion, actually. And I'm not willing to look at the potential and capacity for badness in my own heart. So that's the beginning of the answer to that question. Thank you for that question. Yes?
After you finished your walk, how long was it before you had another peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
After I finished my walk, how long was it before I had another peanut butter and jelly sandwich? I didn't get sick of the peanut butter and jelly, but you know what I did get sick of? I would buy these pre-cooked Spanish rice dinners, and I would, at the end of the day, if I didn't find a place to buy some food or go to a diner, or if I wasn't at someone's house, I would mix tuna fish into this microwavable Spanish rice. And they say anything tastes good after a long walk. And they're wrong. They're wrong. So I to date, have, actually no, I have had that. I hike on the Appalachian Trail every summer with my brother. We started this 3 years ago, and that is a part of our menu, which we may have to grow out of. Yeah. Mac, bring it home, man. I went to high school with Mac.
What are some more nuanced steps that you have for us to try and make connections with people if we might lack the same courage that you have?
Someone ain't listening back there. Hey, and that's all right. That's totally all right. Question was, what advice, what tips, pointers might I have for those of us who may not have the courage to reach out to other people? I guess one thing I can say is that the fear begins to disappear immediately the moment an earnest question is asked. the fear begins to disappear the moment an earnest question is asked. And so then the question after that becomes, well, what is earnestness? What is sincerity? And that's something each of us has to realize for ourselves, because I can't tell you what sincere is for you. I can't, that's your own unique experience. And so, what is something? I don't know. A litmus test for sincerity that I've found is, if I feel a little uncomfortable asking or saying it, then sincerity is in the works. If I'm afraid it might show something, that's maybe what are they going to think of me if I ask this kind of a question? What if it shows that I actually don't know everything? Yeah, okay, ask it. That's the one. Something you really care about. Something that means something to you, that bothers you, that turns you on, So I want to finish with a little uncomfortable offering for me, as just a thank you for listening. And I wish you well in your journeys, each one of you. And I'll be here. There are books for sale, signing them if you'd like. And we've got a song to finish this off. Come, my soul, and let us try for a little season every burden to lay by. Come and let us reason. What is this that casts thee down? Who are those who grieve thee? Speak and let the worst be known. Speaking will relieve thee. Thank you.